they just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness.
Awesome. Awesome.
That was awesome.
You guys are awesome.
No, you're awesome.
You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. And this episode, I feel like this is going to be a special one. This is one that is going to be one of the most unique podcasts I've ever done, based off just the scenario of how not necessarily how we're recording, but based off of where this person is located. I'm actually not sure how I should ask this before the interview started. We'll let him give it away if that's allowed. But when I was asked if it was cool to do this interview, like there was a couple sentences in the email message or whatever, but when it was about space, I was like, yeah, absolutely. There's no way I'm not going to talk about space for 2.5 hours or however long we go here today. Please welcome to the show, CEO of Global Space Organization. Oh God, I already am going to mess it up. Caed Aldwych.
That's correct.
Oh God, okay, thank God. I was like, oh my God, I just asked him how to pronounce his name, and I'm already going to screw it up. Thanks for doing the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
So I'm not sure how much we can actually say, because this is one of the most unique situations to do this show under. I do remote podcasts all the time, but this one, like, we're working on like about a 9-hour time difference.
Yes.
And I'm not sure. Are you allowed to say where you're at, or?
I can just say I'm in Afghanistan, and that's about it.
Okay, so it's a unique situation. Definitely the most exotic location that I have recorded on. It's very exciting to me to be doing this, and more so to talk about space and what you got going on with your company, what you're trying to do, and beyond that. As I mentioned before we started the show, and my audience knows, I try not to do much research. I like to think of this show as more of the show where if you and I sat down in a bar together, this is probably a conversation we would have. So it's like the most truest form.
Exactly.
So where I want to start is, I guess, like kind of your origin story as it pertains to space. Why, like, where does your interest in space begin? How far back? I'm assuming as a kid.
Well, that's a good question. It did start when I was a kid, and it pretty much started when I was about 4 years old, because I actually witnessed on TV the Apollo landing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've been around for quite a while.
Yeah, so that's something that I would imagine that most of this audience, they've probably rewatched at some point. I don't think this audience, myself included, is something that we were around for to watch live. So you have more of a I guess like a classical interest in space, whereas like for me, for instance, like my interest in space comes from the complete opposite of watching something so realistic and so monumental in that. It comes from Star Wars, basically. Like I go the flip side to science fiction, and that's where like space captured my imagination.
Exactly.
So was that so the Apollo landing, what was it that grasped you? Like, what was it that made you love space from that moment? Was it the monumental moment of the time?
I think I understood even at that young age, especially from my father. My father was a space nut. He was into all the old science fiction novels, and space was a big thing for him. And so I think he kind of impressed it upon me when we were watching the Apollo landings. about how important it was, and particularly where it was. And I've always been an explorer at heart, part of the reason why I'm currently working out here. I like going places. I like seeing new places. I like doing new things, and I constantly like to travel. And space is a big part of that. And part of the reason why I formed this company is because the current world as it is has decided, in a way, not to go back, which I never could really understand. So we're going.
Yeah, it seems like, when I was a kid, I'm 32, so when I was a kid, we'll say like, about 25 years ago or so, like it seemed like space was super important. Even back then, and maybe less so compared to when you were a kid, but it seems like that was an important thing to learn about, and that, space exploration was something that was important. And it's definitely seemingly has died down. Maybe that's just me being an adult, not being in the news as much of that kind of world. But it seems like, as far as like, I guess a government standpoint, it's not necessarily like the focal point. I think I just recently read an article about NASA getting a bunch of funding for Mars missions.
Yeah, you are kind of out of the loop.
Yeah. Well, and so this is where, I'm sure like our age gap, maybe generation gap, I'm like on the border of Gen X and millennial, and I've never been a big news person. So like when I read something like that, it just so happens that I was like, let me go to Google News, and like I have 10 minutes to kill. Let me see if there's any interesting articles. And
Exactly.
Of course, seeing something that says something like NASA gets funding for Mars mission or whatever, that catches my attention. I guess it's like to land an actual person on Mars, or they're getting a bunch of money. But point of that little tangent is that there's definitely a push for private space exploration versus the government aided stuff.
Exactly.
So your love of travel, it sounds like it also begins with the Apollo landing. Let's get into that. Like, when did you start traveling the world?
Yeah, when I joined the U.S. Navy, which was in 1984.
The year of my birth. So 32 years ago, roughly, is when you started traveling the world. Have you been basically on the move ever since, or do you have a place you consider home aside from the States itself?
That's a good question. No, actually.
So have you been traveling?
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, so you've been traveling pretty much nonstop for the last 32 years?
I've had, as a contractor after the Navy, as a defense contractor, I've been to several places, but typically speaking, I live out of apartments here and there whenever I do have to settle down and work for a year or two.
How is that? As I used to travel for work, definitely not like that. Not as much as you. My travel, was United States and Canada, and typically just East Coast. I think I went West Coast once or twice, and I was only gone for maybe a week or two at a time. I would be back for the weekend, and then I'm back on the road. So I had a permanent home here in the Philly area.
Right.
So what's it like to kind of, I don't want to say live out of a suitcase, because you're not necessarily doing that, but you're doing definitely something in between living out of your suitcase and having permanency.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to it. There's things you don't have to worry about. You just live, work, and do what you like to do.
So
yeah, I tried to own that. I tried to do the whole owning a house thing once, and that just didn't work out.
What was that, because of the nature of the job, or did you get bored just staying in one place?
Exactly. You get bored of staying in one place, and all of the details that have to come with owning a home, such as mowing a lawn and vacuuming and cleaning and doing all the housework is just
Yeah.
stuff I never had time to do. So
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as a homeowner, that is, I mean, it's stuff that I have to force time for.
exactly.
But it is, yeah, I can see, especially if you just have, I guess, the mind or have the drive to explore. Explore. Um, what's one of the most let's see, I don't know how to phrase this question. I'm not sure what I want to ask here. What's one of the most interesting places that you've been, and why? Like, what was so exotic about it?
In Guam. I was stationed there for a while. It was a pretty interesting place. I was there with the Navy, and that was sometime around early 1990s.
Okay.
And the people there have their own definite culture and very unique. But Guam was wonderful in the way that it kind of reminded me of basically old world U.S. It was literally like being in the old West.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
that's that's very interesting. I would never think of another like a foreign place like feeling like old West US, you know?
It was mostly
Um
because of the way the culture is there.
okay.
I mean, it is a also like a resort area, similar
Oh,
to
okay, yeah, yeah.
Hawaii in some respects, but they have gun clubs on just about every corner, and they have people that walk around with guns. So that's in the reference to the whole old west style of
Oh,
living that
okay.
happened
So
to me.
oh, okay. So are they I guess like the exposed, it's not they carry it on their hip old west style kind
Yeah.
of
In a
deal.
lot of cases,
Um
and in a lot of cases, they do have concealed as well. But basically the culture revolving around these gun clubs is all Old West style. So they like doing the shoot 'em ups and things like that.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I can see how that's like a real, because I would have to, I don't know, is a man that loves space also a man that loves like that old west, because they seem like two vastly different things, like futuristic
Are they
and
really? They also have the
that
explorer mentality in mind. I mean, that's what the Old West was all about,
okay.
exploration.
Good. And that's, you say that, and as soon as I said what I said and you said are they, it brings to mind, and I this may not have been a thing on your radar, because maybe you weren't around, but the show Firefly that was
Awesome.
on for a season, great show. So yeah, that's basically the old west in space. So yeah, at the same time of them being different, they are actually very similar. I don't know, being a fan of Firefly, don't know how I did not connect that before right now. Um, so is it when you're in your travels, whether when back when you were in service or as a contractor, uh, and I would have to imagine that you are easily adaptable, but like how is it adapting to these new locations? And I don't know. I guess because if you're doing work for the government, the army, whatever, I guess you're in areas that are U.S. based, or if that makes sense. But you're still exposed to those outside cultures that's not the what you were born and raised into. So
Right.
how is it? I guess my question is, as a person who has done this for probably most of your life at this point, is it just kind of like second nature to quickly kind of adapt and not have like a culture shock?
I don't. I suppose I never really noticed a culture shock from any of my journeys. I actually look forward to new cultures, seeing new things. I am firmly in the American culture, but seeing other cultures is a very unique experience. Meeting people from other walks of life that have different ideals than maybe we do, or different dreams and aspirations. But in a way, people around the world are the exact same as people in the U.S. Culture divides us, but dreams and prosperity unite us.
That's very very well said. That's yeah. I like to when I talk to people that travel and well more than I have ever traveled. Like I said, I think the most well, I mean, I've taken a couple vacations to Mexico and Jamaica, obviously, but that's always like in a resort area where it's very American friendly for the most part. So I mean, outside of being in a resort, the biggest, most quote unquote exotic place I've been to would be Canada. And I don't think we can classify that as being necessarily exotic. At least the east coast of Canada where I've been. So like for me, traveling has always been like, oh, it's just kind of like another version of America or another version of Philadelphia. Right. So when I talk to guys that do all the traveling, it's interesting getting their aspects on the culture, the different cultures. And I don't think anyone's ever really phrased it like you, saying that it's different, but everyone is actually kind of the same, with that they all have dreams and whatnot. I don't think anyone's ever phrased it that way. That's just a unique I think outlook.
It's a good one.
So when throughout your years, you said your father was into the science fiction, so did you gravitate towards that as well? Not just enjoying the realistic aspects of space, but enjoying the fictional aspects?
Well, I enjoy the fictional aspects too. Like you, I'm a fan of Star Wars as well. Firefly I watched, and I'm into all the various science fiction genre. But I'm also a historian at heart as well. I like history and following history and seeing where we came from, which helps show us where we're going.
That is, oddly enough, something I don't think was beat into me enough in school. It's something that you kind of learn when you get out of school. And because now I wouldn't call myself a history buff, but I've always enjoyed that like I was never a big fan of school.
Yeah, neither was I.
It's great. Yeah, it's great for people that love school and I guess need that kind of structure. But I went to college for a little bit, dropped out, and years later I'm in and out, going back, trying to just slowly work up to get that degree of mine. But I've never been like a big fan of it, which. I feel like that's not a bad thing. And you just said you weren't a fan of it as well. What was it about school that you didn't like?
The teachers.
Yeah, I don't, for me, it was, I don't know. I just was, I always, I guess it could be that too, the teachers. I always feel like I'm even in my current job, when I'm like, I have to sit through a training, I always dread it because like, I'd rather just sit down and by myself and watch a video or read a book
and learn it on your own.
Yeah. Learning it on your own for me seems like the best way to do it, to get your hands dirty.
That's exactly what I do in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, and that's especially in today's world. Like, I work with computers, which my current job actually is far less than that. But my previous jobs, I would call myself like a network administrator, and like to me, that job is all like with the way technology changes. It's always like I work with guys that are like, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I fix this? It's like, well, I mean, look at it, figure it out. If you can't, like, there is like. The beautiful thing about 2016 is that there's Google. Like, you can just type in your issue and you can find someone that's already had that issue and read through the article, watch the video, and absorb that information yourself to learn it, and then go apply that fix, versus me telling you how to do it. You're not going to learn anything.
Right.
But yeah, I think, school for me, like, history was the one class that I would look forward to. And I think even more so in those early years of college I took, I was taking American History 1 and 2. Like, I really enjoyed that, and I think that's where I learned that, like, that mindset of, you know, knowing our past leads us through our future. It's definitely not something that I think was beat into me in high school or anything. It's something that between college and mostly myself, I think that's something you learn on your journey.
Absolutely.
So your company, Global Space Organization, let's talk a little bit more about space and what you're doing with that. So what is, I know, you know, your big mission seems like to be getting humans back out into space, starting with the moon. So what's like, what made you A, form this company, and B, like, what's the game plan? What are your hopes and dreams that's going to happen with GSO?
Forming the company, I'm pretty straightforward issue there. I have issue with the governments of the world that basically decided they were going to stop going into space with humans, particularly NASA. There have been vague attempts throughout the last several decades since we did the Apollo program where they thought about going back to the moon but just never done it. And I can't really blame the government for it because they really don't have any reason to go. And that's part of the issue. And because governments of the world don't have a reason to go, why spend the money to do it when they have all of these other programs they have to worry about, all of the issues across the world? So relying on a government agency to go to the moon has been difficult for many in the industry, difficult on NASA itself because many of the employees do desire to see humans back out in space. But the overall leadership, the overall politics behind it stymie it. So basically the order of the day for space programs, especially governmental space programs, is lesser is more. In other words, let's send probes because probes don't cost as much as sending a human into space. So basically, the path into space is commercial, and it's going to have to be commercial. Yeah, when you look back through history, it's pretty much the same deal. Colonists that crossed the United States frontier back in the early 1800s and late 1700s oftentimes were funded by corporations to blaze trails and look for new products such as furs to sell on market. And then when those trails are blazed, the government would follow. And that's how the space arena is going to proceed. Corporations will advance space progress, and then at some point the government will follow along with their people. So basically, the reason why I did start GSO when I did, it's been an idea that has been percolating in my mind since the late 90s. What would it take to get humans back into space? And I determined that possibly a corporation, especially the larger corporations that have lots of money to throw away, could actually handle, especially if there were several companies involved, the high costs. And between those several companies, those high costs can be mitigated and brought down so that each company could afford their fair share and still have assets in space. So I began developing a plan to form GSO at least a couple decades ago, and then Elon Musk came on the scene with SpaceX and launched a mission to the International Space Station and was successful in 2012. And basically, the only block I could foresee with a company going into space was that the arena was owned by government at the time. But in 2012, that all changed, and when it changed is when I formed GSO, and here we are today.
Okay. So obviously one of your goals is to bring us back to the moon.
Correct.
What are your steps to get there?
Yeah. For the last few years, since 2012, the GSO is beginning its message out. And the reason for this is, one, you have to be known to be seen by the big players. And when I talk about the big players, I'm talking about not the players in the space community, because they can't really help me. They don't have the funding to help me. Going to the moon is big business. I'm talking large scale. I'm talking not only building a station on the moon that other people are talking about that'll house like maybe 4 astronauts up to 12. I'm talking about building a station on the moon and bringing hundreds to the moon by 2030. So an ever expanding station. this is going to cost quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
But when you figure the costs in billions of dollars, which I estimate around $6 billion a year to cover an ever expanding station, what we have is you can look into other categories of where the world spends large amounts of money, especially when you're talking advertising dollars from Coca-Cola Corporation or McDonald's or all of the sponsors for the Olympics, which in 2014 spent close to $50 billion just for that one year. The money's easy to come by if you can portray the goal to those entities that have the money that it would be worthwhile and beneficial to them. So the process of the last four years or so is getting our name out so that we can be seen by these entities we're trying to attract, and develop a program so that they see we have an asset that will help them, and then prove to them that we can conduct what we're going to do, the mission, in order to get their businesses into space and on the moon so that they can operate productively and earn a revenue. And that's been the goal. And our goal's been advancing. We're getting ready to implement GSO Earth Station One, which is basically our training station here on Earth, which we plan to develop in 3D print in Arizona in the desert. And from there, using the station, we will train as we go, as it were, so that we can teach our crews how to operate the station, its life support systems, its power systems management, and formulate our operational doctrines so that when we get to the moon, we can hit the ground running and get these businesses profitable on its surface.
So Earth Station One sounds like it would basically be the same thing that you plan on putting onto the moon.
Correct.
It's just so that they can train here.
Yes, and it'll also act as a model for what we can do so that we can show these major players that this is what we intend to do, this is how easily we can do it, and this is how easily we can do it on the moon.
So with Lunar Station One, is like the idea to, because when you said like hundreds of people, that kind of blew my mind of like opening up many doors. Is it kind of, I guess, like the first steps into like creating, I guess, like homes on the moon, like making it a place of not just travel, but possibly, obviously work and life.
Yeah, at some point, yes. In the beginning, our crews, there's a lot of particulars, especially the hazards in space. When you're talking space, the lunar surface, we look up at it. We know it doesn't have an atmosphere, but does that really click? What does that actually mean? It doesn't have an atmosphere. It has zero pressure. So basically, you're confined to a living space that's pressurized. You also have to consider radiation. You have solar and cosmic radiation that bombard the lunar surface constantly. The astronauts felt it when they landed there in the Apollo missions. All of them were radiated to some degree and received cataracts as a result later in life. So these are hazards that have to be mitigated. These are hazards that actually have to be blocked. Part of that process is developing a station that has really thick walls, utilizing lunar regolith to build them. The walls we're looking at and considering building are 3 meters thick, covering the entire station. And the reason for this is because that's the material that'll block pretty much all the highest particle events from the sun or from the actual solar system flying around. It'll block it cold so that the astronauts stay safe and receive no radiation. You also have to consider micrometeorites, which are a hazard as well, and a station that thick will block them all. We're also considering putting the station inside what's called a lunar lava tube. We have lava tubes all over Earth, basically created by lava flows like a massive cavern, which are reportedly all over the lunar surface, but we haven't actually been able to determine if any of the lunar rills that we see actually lead into a lunar lava tube. But that's more research we'll be conducting on our goal of 2020.
So I just want to go back to the lunar lava tube. So it kind of sounds like basically you would be building with like, is it underground? Like a cave-like situation that you would be building the station in?
If we can, like I said, if we can't, then we can still be capable of building above ground with thick walls. If we build underground, our walls don't have to be as thick because the cave itself will have estimated from science and projections from some holes they have found in the lunar surface that might lead into lunar lava tubes. They estimate the ceiling of these structures could be about 45 feet thick. More than enough, more than ample enough to protect against radiation and micrometeorites. So we could actually build basically a small city in one of them.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, lava flows on the lunar surface were created by, of course, meteorite impact millions of years ago. And the lava flows basically expanded, created these cave-like structures. And then when the lava receded, they cooled and left these massive caves on the lunar surface. And they're bigger on the moon, supposedly, than on Earth due to the lower gravity.
So, oh, did we lose you?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. It went quiet for a second. So, oh, God, it's just such a fascinating idea to create basically a little society on the moon. How would that work? And I guess this is where you're saying like kind of the government would follow the corporation, but how would that work in the sense of, you know, you're going up there, you're creating the Lunar Station One. It's I guess obviously owned by GSO, but like what governs it? Like what? And maybe this is well beyond.
That's a very great. Before you continue, the ownership aspect, the GSO is essentially going to be operating, I guess if you could call us anything, we're not really aerospace, we're not a rocket company. We're going to utilize rocket companies to get there. So in essence, we're going to be forming many partnerships. When we get to the moon, our role will be a service and support, and in essence, a construction, because we're going to be constructing the station. We won't own the station. We'll be constructing the station for our partners. So the biggest example I can think of right now is we want to develop a hotel because tourism, of course, is going to bring in money. It's easy to estimate how much you can earn off of a resort hotel on the moon. I know how to get people there. I know how to bring them back. So GSO would be concerned with all of the support aspects of that operation, the construction of the hotel itself through 3D printing and bringing the tourists to the moon for the company. The company in question that we're currently looking at is MGM Resorts International. Bringing them to the surface of the moon and having them operate brings people, because then they also have to have employees. So the employees would come there, operate the hotel, the tourists would come up every month. And from that industry, as well as the many other industries that we bring with us, they will own their assets. So even though the GSO builds the hotel, we need the money to go to the moon in the first place. So in essence, we're not getting funded in the standard way. We're getting paid for services instead.
Okay. So to modify, like how would, and this probably is just me not knowing how things work even on Earth. How would that work? Like as a governance, like who would, like, how would, I don't know. I don't know how to phrase this question. Like, how would, I mean, how would, like, who would own governance, I guess is my question, over what's happening. You know, I don't know if it's the questions on the moon or specifically in Lunar Station One. Well,
in Lunar Station One, the station will be managed by GSO employees because we, as a support operation, will manage the life support systems to make sure everything's operating, everybody stays safe. We'll also be managing the power systems. We'll be managing the thermal controls. We'll be managing the resupply operations, which will be massive. Which is a good thing because it'll create a lot of jobs here on Earth. So in that sort of essence, if you're talking about lunar leadership and law, that's not a role the GSO is adopting. The law is already in place and it's called international law, and that's the law. The same similar law that would follow on the lunar surface, and these laws were sort of implemented in the lunar treaties. There's at least 2 of them. They haven't all been ratified by all nations, but the Moon Treaty basically stands tall in the aspects of that the legal framework for operating on the moon would fall under international law.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So it would be similar to like when you're in international waters, that kind of law.
Correct.
Is where, okay. The answer was under my nose. That makes complete sense now that you just spelled it out in front of me. Cause I was like, it was just initially the thought was like, what, I don't know, like what could happen up there as far as like who could claim what, but yeah, now that makes sense. And you mentioned something about life support and other things. So I guess the idea would be that, and I don't know, I'm going to use very basic terminology here, but essentially like the station would be under a quote unquote bubble so you wouldn't have to walk around in a spacesuit the whole time.
Correct.
And I guess that essentially would just kind of operate how like space stations currently operate then.
Yeah. You could think of it in terms of a submarine underwater. It'll be compartmentalized, but it won't be as tight and constrictive. There'll be more space because we can build on the moon from the lunar surface using lunar regolith as our building material. So we have time to develop a station that's sizable and comfortable, yet compartmentalized to ensure safety for people in a pressurized environment.
And so it sounds like first steps would be like a tourism aspect of Lunar Station One, followed by
not necessarily.
Okay. Well, so what's for Lunar Station One? What would be the first steps for Lunar Station One?
Sciences and research, more than likely. Probably be able to sell the idea and the concept of sciences and research and astronomy companies and corporations for that aspect, because there's a big drive in the science community to have basically an astronomy station on the surface of the moon, especially on the dark side, to be able to view out further throughout the universe that's not blocked by the light surrounding Earth, as it were. In addition to that, exploration could be big for companies that want to, or for science institutions or even government institutions that want to explore the surface of the moon, learn more about it. And not only that, all of the companies that can benefit from operating in a low pressure environment, metallurgy for one, and many others. I also see another big draw for advertising, a big draw for mass media. Imagine the first news broadcast from the moon.
Yeah.
Tourism. Tourism will have a big play, but there are many industries that can operate on the moon.
So, and how would so obviously, people that, and this is kind of skipping ahead to like the tourism, but the question for both, obviously tourism, there's a plan, like they're going for a week or whatever, they come back. How would it work for people that, and I guess this is kind of just how people would fall under similarities to when people are stationed in Antarctica maybe, but like what would be the game plan for people that go to work on the moon and are there for an indefinite, like say, let's use your hotel as an example, like someone that, like a hotel manager, the hotel staff, like is the game plan they would end up living on the moon, or they're there for X amount of time before they have to go back to Earth for, I guess, I don't know if there's a reason to go back to Earth if you're working on the moon.
No, there is in space, especially in low gravity areas, especially on the International Space Station. Humans aren't adaptable to it, at least not to a degree. We suffer bone loss. We also suffer muscle loss. Staying up for a year is okay. You do have significant loss in bone and muscle mass, but it is nothing that you can't recover from after a few weeks of working out once you return to Earth and be under standard gravity. But under low gravity conditions, we can't operate forever up there. So in the beginning, until we implement a pseudo-gravity system by using a rotational habitats, which will take a while to develop on the moon, we'll be under at least 1/6 of the standard gravity on Earth. So it's not the same as being on the International Space Station. We'll have the capability of staying on the lunar surface longer, but living there probably won't happen yet, at least not for another decade or two.
All right, so like if I were to go up there and work at some place, it would be like as a X amount of time contract before I would have to come back to Earth.
Right, we're looking
kinda
at 6 to 9 month rotations.
Okay. So that, expand that not only is the workforce expanding because there's going to be jobs on the moon, but you're going to have to cycle people out. So it's really kind of expanding the workforce everywhere.
Exactly.
But that now is going to, I guess, how will the GSO be involved in helping develop some sort of program for these companies that when an employee comes back, like what needs to happen to recondition them to Earth's gravity, get them back into their as you said, their muscle, their bones, get them back up to standard healthy shape.
Yeah.
Will that be something that you guys help facilitate?
Absolutely. The people that we bring to the moon, we're going to be training. Basically, a lot of people say in the commercial space industry that the first people on the moon are going to be tourists. That's not really the case, because we have to have all of the support for the tourists that go up there. And so we're going to have quite a few workers on the lunar surface before tourists even arrive. We'll be implementing a training program just like NASA does to ensure that the employees that do go up are physically fit and capable of being up there for long periods of time. In addition, extensive medical coverage. Because leaving Earth, you still get radiation exposure. You get radiation exposure all the way to the moon, and while you're there, you might be protected in the habitat, but then you get radiation exposure all the way back. One of the things we're trying to or planning to implement once we're on the lunar surface is developing a cislunar shuttle that's protected against radiation that we can develop right from the lunar surface, launch off a mag rail, and have it basically go to Earth orbit, pick up tourists in a passenger cabin that gets dropped off in orbit, say from a Falcon 9 launch, and then carried to the station so that they can stay protected better en route and back. But the physical aspects of being a lower gravity is once they return to Earth, they'll have to naturally go through a physical and medical regimen to ensure that they are okay from the trip.
And is this going to also affect, like, is that how tourists are gonna, like, are they gonna have to go through a training to go on, take a vacation on the moon? Are they gonna have to do some sort of training, or is the beginning until
we get these other aspects in place? The shuttles we're talking about, we know we can create artificial gravity through rotation, centripetal force. So the ship we create, the shuttle, will have basically a rotating wheel that will spin and provide gravity for the 3-day journey to the moon. In essence, we want to employ the same thing on the lunar surface, provided we have space and the materials necessary to do it. If not, it'll take some time. But an actual rotating habitat that offsets the 1/6 gravity on the lunar surface, so that the spin makes up for the rest and gets standard Earth gravity. When we implement that, that's when humans can stay on the moon forever.
Oh, that's so. I really like the idea. Going back to the shuttle, I like the idea of so there would be a rocket that would bring the tourists in a separate kind of shuttle bubble, for lack of a better term, into what you said, Earth's orbit, and then the lunar shuttle would kind of like a crane grab it and take it to the moon. And that, again, for lack of a better term, that bubble that they'd be in, which is, it sounds like if it's a 3-day journey, it would be obviously much more expansive than that, because they would have to be able to lay down and sleep and whatnot. But that essentially would, from what I'm understanding, just allow them to live like they're on an RV for 3 days.
Exactly. And we'll make it big enough and comfortable enough, because in essence, all they'll be that supplies and the passenger cabin will be roomy enough for them to stay comfortable in for 3 days. I can envision it being from like a standard Falcon 9 launch instead of a Dragon Heavy launch or the SLS that NASA is proposing. The heavy lift vehicles are good, but if we have a cislunar shuttle, the heavy lift vehicles will no longer be necessary.
Can you, for myself included, for the different kind of launches you just explained, the Falcon and the Dragon launches, can you explain the differences?
Well, a Falcon, back in the Apollo era, rockets can only lift so much weight into space. Depending on the size of the rocket, the more weight you try to lift, the more fuel you need to get the rocket into space. The more fuel you have, the more weight you add, so it's a balancing act. The Falcon 9 is your standard lift vehicle SpaceX has that launches satellites into orbit and can possibly launch 7 astronauts to the International Space Station, but it's not enough. It wouldn't have enough juice to take astronauts all the way to the moon. You'd run out of fuel. So basically, it's centered towards sending small objects into Earth orbit, whereas a Dragon Heavy, which is going to be similar to the Saturn V rocket that we used to launch the Apollo astronauts to the moon and all of their equipment, is the Dragon Heavy is a more powerful rocket where you could do the same thing and launch astronauts along with all their assets straight to the moon. The difference behind that really is cost. The Dragon Heavy is going to cost a lot more than a Falcon 9 launch, quite a lot more. Elon Musk of SpaceX is planning to bring those Dragon Heavy costs down. He wants to drop the prices a lot, and I think he wants to drop them down to something like $90 million per launch. And if he does that, that'll be a game changer for sure. We'll be able to reduce prices a lot more. More and more people will be able to go into space and onto the moon. But until then, the costs are still high. So ways we can reduce those costs is by allowing, like I said, a delivery service in orbit. You drop them off in orbit, and you only need a smaller rocket, less fuel cost, less cost altogether, and I can achieve the same thing.
What and this may be way too early, but it sounds like you've done a lot of numbers. Do you have an idea as a tourist? Like if I wanted to say I'm going to go to the moon, and let's say, from now or whenever, like I have to do the training and all that, how much would it cost someone to say I want to go on a week's vacation to the moon?
Yeah, it won't be a week; it'll be a month.
Okay.
And the price tag I'm looking at currently that can safely be charged at current prices for launch and lift and everything else is about $25 million a ticket for a month's stay on the moon.
Now, would that be kind of like an all-inclusive ticket? Like it's $25 million, everything's covered after that? Or is it $25 million to get to the moon and then, whatever kind of resort or I don't know. I'm assuming that once tourism begins, there's going to be some sort of resort as part of Lunar Station One to make it a vacation. Would it be kind of like a Sandals resort where it's all inclusive or something like that?
It'll be all inclusive.
Yeah.
Right now with the size of the operation we're looking at 2 launches per month. We're looking at least 4 of the passengers from those 2 launches per month being reserved for tourists. We can probably bump that up. We'll also have space available seating for more tourists. And at a base number of 4 tourists per month at $25 million a ticket, you're looking at a revenue of $1.2 billion annually.
Yeah, that's and that is so. I guess eventually, though, and I don't know if this is just maybe my hope and goal, or if this would be a GSO goal, but to get that ticket price down so that it's available to more and more people.
I'll be able to drop that ticket price down by quite a lot once we develop the shuttle.
Okay. So the initial tourism would have to be using that Dragon rocket that you mentioned, where it's
correct
a lot costly. Yeah. Okay. So and once you go down to where you can use the Falcon 9, I believe you said,
yeah,
it will. Okay. That's And
Within
then
5 years, I hope to bring the prices down under $1 million.
oh wow, fascinating.
Yep. But the better option in the beginning is to work, because then you get paid to go to the moon.
Yeah, yeah. So that sounds like that's what it's, if someone wants to go to the moon, it's more so, well, let me get a job that's going to send me to the moon for a month at a time, or however that work. However, so would it be like initially? It sounds like you go there. Would a worker go there for a month, or you said 6 to 9 months, maybe?
6 to 9 months. We're also going to allow, because we can stay longer on the moon than we can on the International Space Station, we're also going to allow bonuses for people that want to stay longer.
Oh, fascinating. And what about would there for like people that are going to go work on the moon that have families? How would that work?
Yeah,
Would-
in the
would there be
beginning, they probably won't be able to bring their families, unfortunately. But later on, as the station expands, and keep in mind, I intend to continue expanding it. The moon is just our first goal, by the way.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get into, because you definitely said beginning with the moon. I definitely want to get into more of that for sure. So, so Lunar Space Station One sounds like such a fascinating, I mean, not just the I mean, even from the beginning, it sounds fascinating, but the overall goal, and even though it's ever expanding, it's just kind of what I'm picturing in my mind, which is something that I guess the Star Wars kid in me, or even just like as an adult, like just kind of fancying the idea of like, wouldn't it be cool to live on the moon or something? It sounds like that is just an awesome little dream turning reality that GSO is going for, to bring life to the moon, and I guess really this could be even a great way to help the homeless problem, if they even if they end up getting trained in jobs that would keep them on Earth. Obviously, if they can get to help out there, hopefully that would turn their life around and not, help solve the homeless problem.
I suppose. One of the
that's just a random thought I had as I was talking that out.
in a way, you're not half wrong. A lot of people think today that to go into space you have to be a pilot, or a nuclear physicist, or some major scientist. If you're working for the government in the NASA program, yeah, you kind of have to be. The program we're looking at, however, we don't necessarily need that level of experience starting. Sure, we'll have some of those individuals hired to develop the systems we need to operate, such as a life support system complex, power systems. We'll need experts to help develop those for our station. But those systems are already created. Companies like Honeywell, VAE, Paragon Space Development Company, all of these companies have these assets, and they've created them already. So in essence, the GSO doesn't really need these high-level experts. We do in certain categories, such as training, the medical field, things of that nature. But these systems that we're going to implement, they're already known, they're already built. Once we acquire them, we ourselves will develop a training program for new hires to be able to operate those systems, understand those systems, and in some cases be able to even construct those systems themselves on the fly on the surface of the moon. They're going to learn the entire station inside and out, so that their main goal is making sure and ensuring all of these very important systems stay operational. So pretty much anybody, everything from a college student to a high school graduate, that could potentially enter this program and learn everything they need to know through our training processes to operate on the moon and have a job working there. So we, in essence, open this category of work, or this dream, as you've mentioned it, to the world.
Yeah, and what I love that you said is that it would be available to someone that has a high school education, to someone that maybe is, just a base college education or maybe a college dropout or whatever, because that's, you and I earlier in the interview had mentioned that, like, school isn't for everybody. And I think that, I've been very lucky as a college dropout to be where I'm at today. Because even in the IT field, whereas maybe when I first started out about 10, 11 years ago, like, it was kind of okay to not have that degree. You still had to work really hard to get that job without that degree. But, it's one of those fields that as time's gone on, it's like they really respect that piece of paper. But I respect companies that, won't look for that. They're looking for just whether it's a good individual or a talented individual or whatever it is. I love the idea that the GSO is opening the horizon beyond, like, you have to have a master's degree to get to the moon and work on the moon. I love it that it's going to be, a kid who just, I wasn't bad in school. I just didn't enjoy it. And 10, I don't know how long, I guess I've been out of school for a while now. But it's so long that I've lost count. That more than 10 years I've been out of high school. And I'm going back to school. Like, I feel like I'm in my forever home as far as my career, but I still feel like I have to go back to school to get that degree just to have it in case something happens. But the GSO is kind of opening those doors. And I think that's really great. That's like a really, admirable thing to do to help out, those kids that just don't have, I don't want to call it drive, because that's incorrect. Just, they don't feel like they need it. They feel like they have a better way to teach themselves what they want to do.
Not everybody learns through a standard teaching program. Everybody learns differently.
Yeah, exactly. As we round out this first hour, I do want to just mention your website and your Facebook page. I do want to continue talking for a little bit more. This is definitely going to be at least a 2-parter episode for us.
Sounds good.
But I feel like I want to go a little bit more for tonight. And then maybe we have to have a second recording session because of our 9-hour time difference here. But so real quick before we round out the hour, gso-space.org or facebook.com/global space organization is a couple of the spaces that people can find you to get more information about what GSO Global Space Organization is all about. Is there anywhere else people can find GSO or yourself?
Those are the two main. We do have a Twitter page. We don't utilize that often. We've just set up an Instagram page for our pending crowdfund for Earth Station One. And we're getting the website revamped soon so that we can prepare for our crowdfund campaign.
I'll tell you what, the Instagram could be probably one of the most interesting Instagrams, even for Earth Station One. But I'm of course thinking of the moon, and like that could be one of the most, for me at least, and I guess who would not love to follow that Instagram and just see awesome pictures of space and the construction. I'm not big into like how, construction and whatnot, but the idea of constructing something on the moon is wildly fascinating. And definitely I think it would probably become one of my favorite Instagrams to watch, just the cool pictures that you would get from it.
Indeed.
All right. So before we end our first session here, I do want to kind of start the conversation about beyond the moon. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's we said it a few times. GSO wants to send humans out into deep space, beginning with the moon. What Correct. Does that mean? What's beyond the moon?
Well, the moon, unlike the Mars first crowd, has to be the first stop. There's just no way around it. Even Elon Musk, who just had his recent speech in the last space conference, I believe it was in Colombia or Mexico, stated that the first crew going to Mars was more than likely going to die. And that's pretty much a factual statement. Mars is something like a 7 to 9 month trip at its lowest
Oh, wow.
point of orbit. Musk is claiming he can send them in 80 days. I don't see how that's possible. And he wants to send 100 people at a time. I think he's got big dreams, and he's claiming if the first crew goes there, they're all going to die. That means he's going to kill off 100 people. I don't think he's quite going to do anything like that, but because Mars is so far, and this is what I tell people constantly that tell me I should be considering Mars first, and they do that because Mars has a slight atmosphere.
Okay.
It's very slight, and according to all of the bigwigs in the Mars First crowd, you can grow food there. You can't really because the soil's bombarded by radiation. You're going to have a very difficult time growing food there. Since the ground is being bombarded by radiation, it's blocked a little bit from the Martian magnetic field, so it's not as significant as the moon. It's still a threat. And the biggest problem, however, is that long trip, because during that entire trip, we can only launch so much weight into space at a time, and it costs a significant amount to launch weight into space. Our ships won't be designed significantly enough to protect crews against solar and cosmic radiation. So the crew is going to get bombarded by radiation no matter what during that entire trip. The reason why it wasn't really a hazard for the Apollo crews is because it was only a 3-day trip there, a 3-day trip back, and they maybe stayed on the moon for 3 days. So they were bombarded by radiation for about 9 days total. Radiation becomes a hazard through the level of radiation you receive to the length of time you receive it. So the crews, even if they survive the trip to the moon, they're going to be irradiated a lot more than they should. They'll probably arrive weak because they'll be in a zero pressure environment for that entire time. And they probably won't be much good to survive. And even if they are able to set up systems in place beforehand, they have one crop failure, they're done. There's no resupply operation to Mars. It's too far away. The biggest issue I foresee of any Mars program currently is because of the massive cost. There is no return on investment. There's no way you can make money off of Mars because it's so far away. So the only goal for going to Mars is just to colonize it. That means you need to send lots of people. But those people need support. When the Roanoke colony was lost, I use this example constantly. The Roanoke colony failed and became the lost colony in the United States because it had no support for up to like 3 years. They had no returning crew vessels to help support it and supply it provisions, and they died out, or they blended in with the native population and disappeared. Mars will be our first Roanoke colony if we go there first without support. And that support comes from, like I said, the moon. The moon has to be first. It's closest to us. It's only a 3-day trip. With modern technology, we might be able to even reduce that trip a little bit more, maybe a 2.5 day trip. It's close enough that if a major problem happened, we can send assets into space and collect those crew members and bring them back. So Mars is safer. Mars is easy to resupply. Anything it needs, even if we run short on, is a 3-day resupply mission away. So the moon has to be first. From there, it'll turn into a platform of operations that can resupply the Mars, because I mentioned before that we can launch the shuttle from the lunar surface via magrail. We can do the same thing with supply containers. We can launch them via magrail at speed, whatever speed we want, to be able to achieve Martian orbit. So we can send supplies on the fly with no fuel. Have it grabbed by the Martian orbit, and then a shuttle from the Martian in Martian orbit can grab those supplies and take them to the surface. So everything, all of our goals in deep space have to begin with our moon. The moon will become our future port of operations. That's why it's going to be an ever-expanding station, because as more and more businesses head to the moon so that they can conduct operations from there and further out, the first notational area that I'm looking at and focusing on is the asteroid belt, simply because the asteroid belt has water. water is very important. It's abundant throughout the solar system. A lot of people don't know that, mostly in ice chunks in the asteroid belt. But that water is going to be a very important resource to utilize for fuel and, of course, water and life support systems. So, does that answer your question so far?
Yeah. A lot of information. So yeah, no, so because obviously the moon, you have to create everything. You have to or supply everything because and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but there's no water on the moon. There's no anything on the moon that could help you survive. So I want to go back to something you said about Mars, how you can't grow food on there right away because of all the radiation. How is that? Is there plans for the GSO to grow food on, like, have like little farms on the moon in this lunar station?
In the lunar station, food in the beginning is going to be. This is what I love about the space community. They say constantly that future astronauts are going to become vegetarians, simply because there's really no safe way to bring animals into space. And then when you also consider animals polluting a pressurized system, as it were, there's no openness. So in a way, it's kind of cruel to think about bringing animals into space and being in a low pressure environment when humans can think and calculate and devise. Animals can't in that regards. Animals may eventually go into space when we have systems capable of supporting them and some gravitational systems that allow them. But in the meantime, the food that will be grown on the moon will be limited. And making people eat nothing but plant life that's grown on the moon is just not going to work. That's why I keep harping on the fact that there has to be a very active resupply operation. People want their candy bars. People want their steaks. People want this. People want that. And it'll be uncomfortable for anybody living up there to be basically relegated to what would amount to be a vegan diet. So one of the major goals of the GSO is to build and develop through partnerships a massive resupply operation. And like I said before, the detractors being the cost and launch, but we're going to mitigate those costs by having many corporate partners join us in this goal so that we have assets on the moon for them. They can operate, they can earn a profit, their costs are low, and then we'll be able to also, with that money, support a massive resupply operation to bring the needed items that people are used to and that people want. And those same resupply, you also consider from resupply operation or resupply idea, people like their mail. Mail operations to the moon. We make a deal with FedEx to package mail in specific ways so that it can be taken to the moon. One of the ideas is plastics can't be found on the moon, various polymers that could be needed for systems, especially insulation from radiation. Packaging could be all of polymers so that when the package comes up, the individual gets their package, we get the plastic so that we can reutilize it on the surface of the moon. All of these factors can go into play, including the mag rail that can then launch all of these resupply operations to Mars so that when a group does get to Mars, they have an active resupply operation so that they can survive.
Okay, so I want to unpack a couple things. So I want to stay on the food for a second. So would there be a plan to like basically outsource anything that's not vegan and have vegan life? Have vegan vegetables and all and fruit and whatnot grown on the moon? Is that possible? I guess.
Yeah, certain plants have been known, at least through NASA, to thrive in space, especially grown in zero gravity. I believe tomatoes is one of them. So we can grow plants. Plants are going to be grown simply also because they also produce oxygen and they act as a very natural carbon filter for the atmosphere. So we are going to have a very healthy food growth lab. For that very purpose, and it's going to expand. And so if you are a vegan and you're working on the moon, you're going to have plenty of food.
and also just a supplement for like if for instance, let's use the McDonald's example. Maybe they don't have to import like vegetables that they use for the lettuce or the tomato that they offer on their burger. They just have to import the meat and whatever else they need. Yeah. So okay, that was the vibe I was getting. Now, and I kind of want to save a lot of the Mars talk maybe for the next episode, but we can leave this as like a little teaser, because we mentioned Mars, first not being an option, but using the lunar station as a resupply for Mars. I have two questions in regards to Mars before we kind of fully go on that conversation in the next episode. One. Is GSO do you have a long-term plan beyond the lunar station to have a GSO Mars station?
Absolutely.
And okay. And we can talk in detail about that in the next episode. That absolutely answers perfect for now. That's a nice little teaser. But I guess would that be the plan before sending resupplies to Mars? Like, would you send would GSO send resupplies to, let's say, someone else? So let's say Mars First has a successful colony set up on, or station set up on Mars. Would GSO be resupplying not just the Mars station for GSO, but the SpaceX station, for instance?
Absolutely, resupplying anybody that need it.
Perfect. I want to, I do want to get more into Mars and your thoughts, and maybe even if I feel like maybe there's something beyond that. I'm not sure.
Mars
is
just another stop.
Okay, cool. So perfect. I want to talk more about that. Maybe I have some other notes that I have one other note that I jotted down that I feel is going to be appropriate for the next episode. It goes on the little wild tangents I like to go on this show a little bit too. So I do want to talk more about Mars and beyond, maybe talk a little bit more pop culture space stuff that's either inspired you or that you just are into. I want to talk more about that on our next episode. I do, again, I know we plugged it a few minutes ago, but make sure you check out, and let me scroll down here, gso-space.org, facebook.com/global space organization. I'm certain that those places, once you have your Instagram up and running for Earth Station One, I'm sure the links will be on those, so people can find them there.
Absolutely.
For part one of this episode, thank you for speaking with us on Everything is Awesome here. Truly, this is one of the coolest discussions I've had, because it's not just usually my conversations about space on this show revolve around Star Wars and The Force Awakens. So it's not usually in like a serious, in-depth science-y kind of conversation. It's usually more pop culture-y and stuff, which I want to get into some of that stuff in the next episode, but I do want to talk about your mission and stuff, and I really dig it. I really love the idea of going back to the moon first, because that does, you the way you explain it, it makes total sense, especially like I always try to the end of the episode, and we always go on a couple other tangents, but like you mentioned, those first 100 people are going to die going to Mars is what Elon Musk said. Like the people that signed up for that, like since I've heard about that, I'm like, that sounds kind of crazy, that like, yeah, I'm just going to go and never come back, and I'm probably going to die, whether it's on the surface or whether it's in orbit. Like, I'm just going to go. Like, I don't know, maybe that's the selfishness that I have, that I don't want to ever die. So yeah. The idea of going to Mars just to die, like, that blows my mind, that there's 100 people, more than 100 people, but 100 people specifically are going to be willing to do that first.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll find them too.
So, all right. We will be back next week, as far as the audience is concerned, to continue our conversation about the Global Space Organization with, oh my God, and it's literally an hour, and so since I've had to say your name, so Caed?
Caed. Yes.
Caed. God, I'm gonna get it. I just
you
need
got
to
it.
remember that oh no, I know. I just need to remember. I need to remember that the C is a K. That's all I
Right.
got to remember. All right. Thank you, Caed, for being on this first part of Everything is Awesome. And we'll be back next week to talk Mars and beyond right here on Everything is Awesome, only on awesomepodcast.com.